Jimmy, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Thank you. Again, welcome to the third Transportation Summit. This is the seventh and final session of the statewide strategy for Riverport investment. I want to thank the Kentucky Riverports Highway, Rail and Freight Office and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet as a whole for putting this on. Quickly, just to go through the housekeeping items again. As you can tell, there's a mute button. It's on the far left. So I just learned that at the last session. And then if you go through the buttons, if you have anything going on in the background, please turn off your camera. You can provide reactions, of course. And if you need to change your view so you can see the speakers better, there's a button to change your view in the upper right-hand corner. Just a quick reminder of where we've been during these sessions. We had the opening session Tuesday, heard the video from Secretary Gray and his remarks, and also from the planning office. On that afternoon, we heard from the ports and the barge operators on a conversation with the inland barge operators. We also had the anticipating the evolution of freight commodities, which was a conversation with the commodity industries that ship and utilize the waterways and the ports with corn, soy, aluminum industries. And that was a great opportunity to hear from the folks that use the waterways. We had the modeling scenarios and Riverport investment strategies on Wednesday. We also had a session on funding programs and Riverport capital improvement needs. And this morning we had the economic development, advancing our state's riverports, and an overview of some of the marketing toolkit items that will be provided with the findings of the study. And today we arrive at the closing session. Just another, kind of just a quick overview of where the study has been and where it's going to be. The first element was the existing role of the Kentucky Riverports and the freight in the economy. Secondly, we did a forecast on the future trade volumes and performance implications. We engaged stakeholders in future needs and opportunities and reached out to the ports themselves and their economic communities. Then we did an investment in performance scenarios with the data and with all the information from the ports. And now we're finishing up the scenario impacts and the formation of the preferred scenario that will be in the final findings of this report. And so it's all coming together here at the end for a successful roadmap for implementation and continued collaboration of the Riverports in Kentucky. And this is just a quick one more look at the schedule. And here we are at the end of Summit 3, which is our last opportunity to get together as a stakeholder community. Coming into September, we'll be doing the study recommendations and finalizing the final report and the final marketing toolkit items. So with just that brief review of where we have been and what has been accomplished, I'd like to bring us into the closing session here, where we have the honor to have both Mikhail Pelfrey, the KYTC's Division of Planning Director, and also Secretary Jim Gray from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So without any further remarks from me, I'd like to hand this over to Mikhail to give his remarks and to introduce Secretary Jim Gray. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, I would like to welcome you to the closing session of the final Riverport Summit for the Kentucky Riverports Highway and Rail Freight Study. The old saying is, the third time's a charm, and with no literal fires to take them away last minute, such as the one on the Brent Spence Bridge involving the truck crash last November, we are excited to welcome Secretary Gray today for comments followed by a Q&A session. At the start of his career, Jim Gray earned a BA from Vanderbilt University, then came back home to Kentucky to help grow his family's construction business, serving as the company's CEO and its chairman. Today, Gray Construction is routinely ranked among the top 5 builders in the U.S. within major industry sectors, including manufacturing, automotive, food and beverage, and distribution. When serving as Lexington's mayor, Gray drew upon his CEO experience to bring a management approach to government. He righted Lexington's financial ship through a series of major reforms and significantly reduced the city's annual employee health insurance costs while improving employee satisfaction. His reform of the police and fire pension system was recognized in 2012 as the most effective in the nation. Gray revitalized the city's downtown and led the effort to make Lexington the largest gigabyte city in the nation. Under his leadership, Lexington was named among the top 5 best run cities in the country 3 years in a row. In December of 2019, Governor Andy Beshear appointed Gray as Transportation Secretary, which involves leading 4,400 employees across Kentucky and an annual operating and construction budget of almost $2.5 billion. That being said, Secretary, the stage is yours for any opening comments you want to make. Thank you. You're on mute, Secretary.
I was told that I had to pay $100 every time I did that to somebody in a previous meeting. Well, I didn't actually pay, but I should have. So it happened 2 or 3 times. But anyway, Mikhail, thank you so much. But you didn't do what I asked you to do. I suggested and I asked, shrink wrap that bio, that biography. But
I
thank
took 4
you very much.
Took 4 sentences off.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate it. I should ask you to go around with me everywhere I make a talk, but thank you very much. And actually, I want to right out of the gate thank everybody who has worked on this project, on this study, and the previous events that have been held, bringing us up to today. It's really, the more I've learned, the more I have respect for everything that's been done. And right out of the gate, I'll give a shout out to Jeremy Edgeworth, who has been the project manager from the cabinet side, and deputy project manager, Mikhail. Thank you, Mikhail, for your work on this. And while both you and Jeremy have juggled with your routine roles, we appreciate it. I also want to mention Chandler Duncan and Jimmy McDonald and Mike Imder from Metro Analytics. We've been hearing from them already. And Ron Erickson and Paul Bingham from IHS Market. From QK4, Rebecca Thompson and Lindsay Hoskins, and from Razor Communications, Mimi Razor and Haley Taylor. If we can give a virtual applause, I would recommend that at this particular time. Thank you all for all you've done. We really, really, really do appreciate it. Also want to thank our other partners for supporting this project. The project team has been working with the Economic Development Cabinet, I know that, and has a steering committee made of key industry stakeholders, including the Department of Agriculture, the Kentucky Transportation Center, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Maritime Administration, Federal Highway Administration, and our public river ports and the cities and counties represented by them. So that tells us a lot about what the study has represented and all those who have been involved with it. And that kind of collaboration is what will make this study become more than something that's just proverbially put on the shelf, but can lead us to an ongoing planning process, an engaging process that will yield results over time. That then becomes the big outcome. I'm going to come back to that when we have a Q&A, because I want to tell a little bit of a story, Mikhail, about my own experience in a study project some 30 years ago when Brereton Jones was governor. I'll come back to that. But I do have a few prepared remarks that I want to share with you all. And then we'll go into the Q&A. So as all of you on this call today, in the meeting today know, our National transportation freight network is one of the really extraordinary assets of the country. Millions of people go to work every day, operating trucks, trains, aircraft, barges, ships, and cargo equipment that contribute to our national economy. The Federal Highway Administration says that nationally, our freight system moves 55 million tons of goods worth more than $49 billion each day. And in addition, the freight network supports 44 million jobs. It's a critical force in our economy, made up of a vast and complex network of almost 7 million miles of highways, roads, railways, waterways, and pipelines in addition. And Kentucky is, of course, central. Its central location in the country makes it central to many of these waterway, rail, and highway networks. The state's freight infrastructure includes 10 interstates, 10 state parkways, 19 freight railroads operating over 2,600 miles of rail, 5 commercial airports with the United States hubs for UPS, DHL, and the soon to open Amazon Prime Air, all of which is an incredibly big deal for our state. In addition, 37,000 miles of pipeline and just over 1,000 miles of commercially navigable waterways, with 7 active river ports and 4 developing river ports. Now, while logistics include transportation modes that vary in terms of their strengths and benefits, each serves an important role in the freight delivery system, and they must work together to create a connected and resilient network. In terms of how KYTC is supporting the river ports, first, in the past 2 years, we have authorized more than $260 million in roadway infrastructure improvements in counties where we have operating river ports. $260 million in roadway infrastructure improvements in counties where we have operating river ports. Ensuring that freight can be transported on land to and from the river ports is a big priority and our primary mission at KYTC, maintaining and improving our roads and bridges. Now, in addition, we have authorized more than $185 million in roadway infrastructure investments in counties with developing ports. So that's altogether 260 plus 185 in both the already existing river ports and our developing ports. Now, specific to river ports, many of you know, perhaps all of you know, that we have the Kentucky Riverport Improvement Program that provides $500,000 annually in the form of general fund matching grants to address critical infrastructure development, facility repairs, and needed equipment to maintain or improve operations at our ports. Now, to date, since 2013, we have awarded just over $4.8 million in Kentucky Riverport improvements to our 7 operational public river ports. We also encourage and support our counties in applying for federal funding. And that's been successful in bringing in tens of millions, to improve Kentucky rail and highway infrastructure as well. In addition, Governor Beshear just announced in June $2.5 million in railroad improvement awards to support the safe, efficient movement of freight across our state. Now, I heard that during this summit, the team outlined a number of funding opportunities for Riverport leaders to consider when planning and developing their operations. There are many opportunities out there to obtain funding for growth and development, and I would encourage everyone involved to seek out these funding options and reach out to our team if we can provide counsel through that process. Our state, our communities, and our industries require and need a multimodal transportation network, a network that includes our river ports. This study is elevating the understanding of the economic role that each of the public ports and over 150 private river terminals play in communities across Kentucky. Our ports provide key waterway connections to and from our communities, to other states and domestic trading partners, to the Great Lakes, and to the Gulf of Mexico and international trade lanes. So, while we're here to focus on future needs for improvements to our Riverport network, we know the connection across all modes of transportation are critical to our success. And we thank each of you for helping us gain insights to help prioritize infrastructure investment and best serve the future freight needs of businesses and industries throughout the state. Again, I want to thank all of you who have been involved in this study itself, all of you who have been with us this week throughout this project. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate your spending some of it on this really important Kentucky initiative. So thanks again, and Mikhail, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Secretary. Really appreciate those opening comments. You hit on a lot of subjects that we've discussed earlier in the summit, whether it be the funding opportunities for the ports that need to pursue, as well as the marketing toolkit that will be one of the end products for this study. So I really appreciate your comments, and as you mentioned, we'll now transition into a Q&A session. Each one of these questions were developed by those in attendance. So, they were vetted, and we are going to ask them of you today. But all these were asked in advance. The first question, would the Transportation Cabinet promote the need for the Kentucky Riverport Improvement Funds to be a permanent budget allocation opposed to being funded from the general budget on an annual basis?
Well, Mikhail, I also wanted to say that fortunately, Jeremy has agreed to give me his subject matter expert advice as we go through these questions. He's smiling, so I'm assuming that he's still agreed to this, right, Jeremy?
I have, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I'll ask Jeremy to supplement or correct me on anything that I say and add to it. So, nothing is really a permanent in our state budget. And we have been fortunate that since 2013, the General Assembly and the governor, in the governor's budget, and then the General Assembly approves, they have included $500,000 annually in general fund revenue for Riverport improvement. And that represents over the last 8 years, roughly a little over 4 million, I think 4.8 million. Is that right, Jeremy?
I believe so.
Yeah. So many of you also know that we're restricted in the Transportation Cabinet from using anything but to use our road funds for anything but improvements to our roads and highways. So it required us to get a general fund commitment for these, for the Riverports. Now, as you go forward, we all know the value that this represents. We also know that some of our surrounding states actually have more funding. And so this is where I would encourage those who are supportive of our Riverports to really form alliances. I've learned being mayor of Lexington in the public sector that the politicians, those who are elected public officials, when they see people getting together, coming together and supporting whatever the project may be, where they really work hard to develop the project, then the public officials, the elected officials, will do everything they can, frankly, to help. So that's what my encouragement today, Mikhail. And Jeremy, you want to add anything to what I've said or correct me?
No, sir, you did a great job.
Well, if I get your endorsement, then we'll proceed. Okay.
There we go.
Well, hey, listen, I'll ask anybody if they want to supplement what I have to say.
No, that was a perfect, that was a
Okay.
perfect response. You've got Jeremy speechless. You know,
Uh-oh.
see if you can do that for the rest of them. You
Yeah.
know, does the cabinet have a position on a Kentucky carbon tax? If so, could a portion of the tax be dedicated to state funding source for the Riverports?
Well, I'm pretty sure, Mikhail, that tax is actually administered through the Energy and Environment Cabinet. And so in terms of KYTC, I would say that we wouldn't really have a say in that. But it's no secret that passing legislation to fund infrastructure improvements through taxes is a challenge. We know that from having tried to increase our revenues through the gasoline tax. And so again, this comes back to, you're going to hear me say this perhaps several times in this Q&A, it comes back to those who are passionate and committed to legislation need to come together so their voices are heard. Jeremy?
Nope, that's correct.
Okay, well, now
Two for two.
you're going to have to, as subject matter expert, you're going to have to say something here in a minute. I know.
Well, the carbon tax isn't one we administer, so we really can't take a position on it. So you were
That's right.
correct. That's up to the Energy and Environment Cabinet.
All righty.
All right, we'll see about this one. With the recent federal infrastructure bill passage, would the cabinet support and request the development of an I-157 East that would connect Kentucky to states west of the Mississippi River? Kentucky is the only state that does not have an interstate highway connectivity across the Mississippi River, and this would significantly enhance the opportunity for manufacturing and a warehouse distribution development in western Kentucky while providing safer and less congested highways.
Yeah, Mikhail, I know that this is a project that has been considered for some time. There is no active plan for this connection. That's not to say that, again, here we go. It's not to say that through advocates and advocacy that it couldn't be elevated. You know, we have a six-year highway plan that often includes very ambitious projects. The new infrastructure legislation that's passed the Senate is now before the House, could provide funding for projects like this. Again, it's not in our plan, but does it represent opportunity? Yes, we can see the kinds of opportunities. I grew up in Glasgow, Kentucky, smaller community in southern Kentucky, and I saw myself. This is going to age me. It's going to tell you that I've been around here a little while. I remember when I-65 did not connect from Louisville to Nashville. And I saw then once it did, it created really a boom for a town, a city, used to be a town, I would say, like Bowling Green. And then the parkways that connected a Bowling Green to a Glasgow, and then further east and west. So we know that these highways do provide what the cabinet's mission, really support the cabinet's mission to, or they represent the cabinet's mission to provide economic opportunities. And that's what we want to keep doing. Jeremy?
I was going to say, I know the cabinet looked at that opportunity, I think 10 to 15 years ago. I mean, if there's strong local support for taking another look at an I-157 connection, you know, we would encourage you to work with the ad planners in your area and have the project evaluated through the cabinet shift process. That's really how potential projects are identified and move through the process. So if that's something that has strong local support, then I would suggest working with the locals to get it put into the shift process for prioritization.
Good. Thanks, Jeremy.
Not a problem.
Okay, Another question, does the Economic Development Cabinet have any input as to state funds allocated to our Riverports?
Well, not specifically, the Economic Development Cabinet does not have a specific input, but we routinely engage. I talk with Larry Hayes routinely, with Jeff Taylor in Economic Development. We work so closely with Economic Development because our highways, especially, and our highways are so, and our Riverports are so instrumental in economic development. And I've already mentioned that the cabinet is constrained, and actually not just constrained, but restricted from utilizing any of our road funds, our road revenues, for anything other than roads and highways. But that said, the Economic Development Cabinet does provide input. As I said, they will help us whenever we're developing opportunities. We routinely will counsel with them, ask for their counsel and advice. Jeremy?
I was going to say the money we currently receive, as it's appropriated to the Transportation Cabinet, it tells us that we are to administer that with the input of the Water Transportation Advisory Board. So that's what we do. That doesn't mean we couldn't involve economic development, but right now the way the budget allocation is written is we involve the Water Transportation Advisory Board. Like Secretary said, if there's additional economic development funds that could be tapped, you'd have to talk to economic development about that. We couldn't really speak to their budget.
Yeah, I think the main point that we're making is that there's a routine communication among and between our agencies throughout the government, and economic development is one of those that we work with very closely, especially on projects that influence our economy.
All right. Perfectly said. Considering the current financial constraints, the Transportation Cabinet has to allocate dollars for roads and bridges. How or where do you see the needed Riverport funding fitting into a future KYTC plan?
Well, I've said this maybe in every question so far, or every response so far, that we're restricted by our 130-year-old Constitution, and that Constitution provided for the utilization of road funds exclusively for roads and highways. Okay, now that said, I encourage everyone to comb through this study, this report, and examine opportunities for advocacy, for advocating for more, perhaps more funding where it is appropriate. And we know that with the 7 existing Riverports and the 4 emerging Riverports, that there are going to be needs. I would point to just recently the Henderson announcement, the announcement in Henderson for the Pratt Industries, a $400 million investment, a pulp and paper operation. And I would speculate, I don't know this for sure, how much of the Riverport they're going to be utilizing, but I can sure, I've got a hunch that that was a big point in the criteria for the selection of Henderson. So that's an example, $400 million investment, hundreds of employees, and then the larger influence through the economy of a project like that.
Yeah, that was that project, and that was mentioned by Greg Pitchett, the Henderson port director, yesterday. So we did have some direct conversation involving that paper product as well. And the other thing I'd encourage that you may not have mentioned is the advocacy groups, the Kentuckians for Better Transportation.
Yes.
They're key to any type of Riverport. They're one of their main advocacy points is for waterways. So that group is another one that we haven't mentioned yet, but that's one that you be in constant contact with to be able to secure funding and any type of improvements for the future on Riverport's behalf.
I'm glad you brought that up, KBT, Mikhail, because yes, they're doing a really great job today. new leadership in the executive director role, and the communication and the advocacy that they're bringing to the table for important legislation like the gasoline tax that we need. You know, if we're going to stay competitive, all of the states around us have 30–40% more in their revenues, and that's just for roads and highways. But if we're liberated some in our roads and highway funding, where we have more flexibility with more revenues, then arguably the general fund may be relieve some of the stresses there, and we might find more opportunity for our Riverports.
Yep. Jeremy, do you have anything to add on that one? Yeah, I assume we covered it all.
I think you covered it well. I mean, the only thing I would add is as they're working on their advocacy, you know, the cabinet's willing to support you and help you in your efforts. I mean, we'll be cheerleaders for your efforts. We'll provide, you know, support. And if you're able to receive additional state funding or successful in getting federal funding, you know, we're happy to help administer that to help the ports. So we stand ready to help where we can.
Okay. The mission of this freight study is to take a holistic state of view of our Riverports and transportation modes for the future growth of Kentucky. Once the study is complete, can you provide your guidance to the ports on how they can leverage the findings to increase funding to support the growth?
Mikhail, this is where I'm going to circle back to my earlier comments. I said I was going to tell a story about my own experience with a study, a government-sponsored study, a Kentucky government-sponsored study, and this has been this is going to tell my age too, because this was in the pre-Neanderthal period, before the turn of the 20th century, the 21st century rather, and it would really been pre-Neanderthals before the turn of the 20th century. But before the turn of the 21st century, in the early 90s, Brereton Jones, then governor, asked me to chair what he described as and it was characterized as a quality and efficiency study for state government. And we came up with hundreds of recommendations on how to improve quality and efficiency in our government, in our state government. This was I led it as the chair, but we had working throughout the government were employees crossing all the agencies. And we came up with literally almost $1 billion in potential savings, but more importantly, we came up with recommendations for improvement. Now, I was really proud of that study because Paul Patton, when he succeeded Brereton Jones as governor, he actually used that study for his blueprint for Kentucky, which among other things led to the state backbone that has and the establishment of a central coordinating for personnel, among other things. But the point I'm making is that advocates continued to work, and there was a plan put together after the study. A good plan was put together, and that plan was then worked. And advocates then were all supporting the movement and the progress and the path forward. So that's what I would say is the opportunity here, is to move from study to plan. And all along that, you've got a parallel path where you've got advocates who are continuously, you know, there's an old aphorism about the speck of sand in the oyster, that little speck of sand, that irritant in the oyster is what makes the pearl. So, you know, sometimes you just got to be that irritant. And that's what advocacy is all about in the public sector. That's what I had to say.
No, that's perfect response. I know a lot of these questions are kind of hitting on similar themes, but the point that we're trying to make is, we as a transportation cabinet are always going to be supportive of these initiatives, but it's up to the ports and up to these local industries to be able to advocate on their behalf. And then once those funds are received, then transportation cabinet will roll from there and we'll support anything that you're willing to do. Do you think the Kentucky State Transportation Cabinet should consider reorganizing the Kentucky public ports and put them under one umbrella, akin to how Indiana has structured the ports of Indiana?
Well, that's one that may be above my pay grade, actually, Mikhail. I'm going to ask for Jeremy to maybe help me out. I'm sure you all in the study examined it. I would say that, there's lots of ways to skin a cat, and there's lots of organizational structures can succeed under different models. There's often the consolidation model, and then there's the loose confederation model. And really, I've always believed that in the private sector, management had two drawers to pull from: one consolidate and one to confederate, and to loosen the bonds through loose confederation. Now, as mayor, I learned that you don't go into things breaking China. You don't want to be the bull in the China shop. You want to ease into an idea. So what I would suggest, not knowing that much about it, frankly, but knowing that there is another model and benchmarking it, that again, examine it as if this is an opportunity where it might improve the advocacy opportunities for the Riverports, then consider it, and make that a part of the plan going forward. Jeremy, you probably know, as I said, you probably know more about this than I do, so jump in.
I'll be happy to. We asked, when this question was posed, we asked this question of our legal office as well as our legislative office, and there is no provision in the law that would even allow the cabinet to take this kind of action. So if this is something that had a lot of strong local and public support for doing, it's going to require a massive amount of legislative effort. So at that point, again, we go back to the point of needing advocacy, because it's going to require a lot of legislation to enact those kind of laws to create a statewide port authority. So, one of the suggestions would be to look at creating a waterway caucus, or an inland waterway caucus, similar to the aerospace and aviation caucus that was just created within the legislature. And that could be one of the first tasks for that inland waterway caucus, is looking at, is that a feasible option? Is that something that has strong local support? And then what laws would need to be crafted to allow that to be something to happen? So again, it goes back to advocacy. There's going to have to be a lot of it done, but that would be my recommendation, is if there's a lot of strong local support for doing that, is working with the legislature to create that waterway caucus.
Yep, and then you put that in the plan. That becomes part of your plan, an action step going forward.
Yep. All right. How does the cabinet plan to help market the Kentucky Riverports as a whole during economic development conversations throughout the region and across the nation?
Well, Mikhail, I would lean on here. I would lean on from a planning point of view, I would lean on the Economic Development Cabinet for marketing and for marketing input. The Transportation Cabinet is really an operational organization, an operational agency. We have a high degree of responsibility for operations for the state. I've learned in this job that there's a reason that the transportation secretary and the folks in the cabinet, like you, Mikhail, like Jeremy, and many others, we're here to support these needs of our cities and counties, and those are in a high octane sense, they're operational. They're not so much about marketing. All right. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have input and ideas. We can. We should have, because we're close to these issues. We're close to the Riverports because of our active involvement operationally. But here's where we want to lean on, in the marketing sense, we want to lean on and rely on the Economic Development Cabinet. Jeremy, help me on that one.
Well,
You
I mean,
agree?
it's critical to have the involvement of economic development and transportation because they're both tied together. I mean, obviously, improved transportation systems often bring improved economic opportunities, and economic opportunities often bring, the need for improved transportation systems. But like Secretary Gray said, I mean, we kind of are the doers. I mean, we build the roads, we build the infrastructure. We don't generally market the infrastructure that we have. That's really up to Economic Development Cabinet. So I would really rely on our Economic Development Cabinet to really help find ways to market the ports, because that's really what they're charged with, is marketing Kentucky's industries and Kentucky's opportunities. So that's why we partner with them on this study, because we help do things, but they help to market Kentucky. So I would really rely on economic development to help market this, the ports and the study after it's over.
You see, Mikhail, why I wanted Jeremy here?
Oh, yeah.
He did a
Yeah.
beautiful job of shrink wrapping what I said into we are the doers. I like that. I'm going to remember that, Jeremy. In the Transportation Cabinet, we are the doers.
That's right.
Good deal.
All right. Well, we're coming in the final stretch because it's got a couple left. Are there any additional plans to continue the current study after this summit concludes? And what is the next steps that KYTC is planning?
Well, I believe I'm right on this, Mikhail, that the study is scheduled to wrap up in October,
Correct.
the end of October. So you're taking inputs and you're taking from this event, and you're continuing to refine then the final edition, the final report. And this is where I want to taxi right back again to the need to move toward a plan that takes the study. I'm sure there are many action steps recommended in the study. So, just reduce that then to a planning document, and then, make sure that people are responsible, where everyone's responsible, nobody's responsible. Always, it's so important, if you got a strategy and action steps associated with it, then somebody needs to hold up their hand and take responsibility for it. And that may include the advocacy. It will include, bringing together allies and bringing together those who are going to advocate on your behalf. That means reaching out to our elected officials, especially in the state legislature, especially with the governor. So there's a common then recognition. And this is what I found, there's nothing more bipartisan than economic development and economic opportunity. Nothing more partisan, nothing more bipartisan than chasing economic development and economic opportunity. So that's what I would encourage. Next steps, get that plan inked in, reduced to writing. Doesn't have to be complicated or complex. It's just, are these action steps, are they identified, and is someone assigned responsibility for them? And then they pull the group together to help them. And then accountability. Jeremy, help me.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think, just to summarize what you said, I mean, once the study's done, it's going to be to organize, get all the ports together. So you're speaking with, a consistent voice, gather all your allies together, whether it's the ports, whether it's, KBT, whether it's Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, whether it's economic development, and then really make a plan, decide how you want to move forward so that you can effectively use your time. And then, as Secretary said, you got to take this information to the legislators and to the governor, because they're the ones that have the administrative, power to make the budgetary and legislative changes. I mean, we as a cabinet don't have the power to make legislative changes or to make, budgetary changes. That's really up to them. So, I mean, that's really what I would recommend is, organize, make a plan, and then, identify who you need to target as far as your advocacy efforts.
Yeah, that I would just punctuate what Jeremy said again, that, and I'll also say, the private sector has a big role in an initiative like this, and that moving a plan forward. The private sector has a lot at stake. And so getting in and hustling and moving the plan creating that path forward is so important. You know, I'll always believe that a good plan is like a roadmap, and the journey is the safest when the roadmap is the clearest. Now, this is before Google days, but let's just say that, you know, it still applies, that the journey is the safest when the roadmap is the clearest. And a good plan is just like that. It's a roadmap. It tells you where you're going and, in a sense, how you're going to get there.
Yep, we agree. And we've got one final question, Jeremy. This might be better suited to you. Can the public ports access the data from the study, specifically the projections for the individual river ports, and how do they access that data?
I can take that one if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, the transportation cabinet, as part of the study, paid a good chunk of change for access to the TransSearch database. And so we received a copy of that TransSearch database related to Kentucky, and it is a massive data set that we have. And so it's not easily accessible just by, you know, the average person. So especially without having some sort of extensive software experience. So what the consulting team has told us is they're going to develop a simplified method to allow our public ports to query the data. And so the public port should be able to hear more about that from the project team on how they can access that data in the more simplified method, because I'll be honest, I haven't even gotten into the data because it is so complex in the software experience that's needed. So the consulting team is developing a simpler method to be able to allow the ports to be able to query that data.
Yeah, I would just footnote what Jeremy had to say is that, you know, this study is in every respect $1 million asset. It represents that much of a commitment by the cabinet, and the cabinet cannot implement. That's not the cabinet's responsibility for implementation of the plan, for creating the plan that emerges from this study and the implementation of it. This is where other folks step up and move it forward. You know, creating that plan and then bringing the allies together to implement. And then results will happen. As I said earlier, one thing I learned is that when the people really, really, really want something and they work really, really, really hard to get it, that elected officials will do everything in their power to make it happen. So, Mikhail, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. You know, I want to thank you again. I know you've got a packed schedule, and I know you just got back from Masto, but you've always been very supportive of all the initiatives ongoing in the Division of Planning. You've always been more than willing to, you know, coming from an audience on, you know, I mean, anytime I've asked, and you know, I can't thank you enough for your support. It really does mean a lot. It means a lot to me personally, and it means a lot to the division too.
Well, hey, listen, thank you. I want to say that it's the easiest thing in the world for the secretary to do after you all have done the heavy lifting. You know, putting this putting this study together, bringing the people together to develop it is really, really commendable. And I can't, you know, this is how things get done. It really is, you know, and these studies are not designed to go on a shelf. This is where, you know, I hope I'm being a bit of a cheerleader here, but this is where those in the private sector, you know, those in the public sector out in the communities, this is where coming together and leading and moving it forward is really so important.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everything that you all did. So this is reciprocal appreciation, Mikhail. Thank you.
I also want to thank Jeremy. As you can see, you know, Jeremy is he's the true subject matter expert on this on behalf of the cabinet. He's got a true passion for anything freight, rail, waterways, and he's a pleasure and he's a joy to work with. You know, this study could not have been completed, and we wouldn't be where we're at without Jeremy. His efforts should be commended, and you know, can't thank him enough. Also want to thank the consultant team, you know, Metro Analytics, IHS Market, QK4 and Razor Communications. They put on a great final summit for us today, a great final session, as well as a great summit. And also want to thank all those in attendance. We listen to your questions for, giving us feedback and participating in all these sessions. Anytime I'm in this, I continue to learn more and more about the industry, and and we'll look forward to the end product in October, and hopefully we'll get you something that you'll be able to work with. Just as Secretary and Jeremy have stated, we'll get you a product and marketing toolkit, and just run with it from there. Work with your legislators and work with the advocates. With that being said, Jimmy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mikhail and Secretary Gray and Jeremy. We can't thank you all enough for hearing, the advocates that went after this study. And I think that's one of the things that should be remembered here, that this is a large undertaking for the state, and they are paying attention, they are listening, and just like Secretary Gray mentioned a moment ago, when you get organized and get together and have a purpose that elevates, like we've been saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When you get in together, that they are listening and they will support you in every way that they can, and when they can't, that's your job, to be organized and find new avenues and new solutions, that some of which were mentioned here. So we really appreciate y'all's support to do this study, to see it through to the end, which we're getting very close to. And also, I think that one of those last questions is, how can you continue to support? And I think it's just taking that message. We get these talking points, we get the marketing toolkit, and we get those action items from the final study, that engaging in that those follow-up discussions and really participating that way. I think that to us would really help the implementation process moving forward. So we again thank everybody. So many people involved here, even some that couldn't participate today. We've had close to 90 folks in and out of the sessions throughout the week. So a lot of support for the Riverport community in Kentucky, and that's encouraging to see. So we'll continue to work hard, and we'll provide the results. And we're going to give you all back 30 minutes to eat an extra. You can order an extra large size a Big Mac now and get the Biggie fries, so you guys can spend some more time at lunch. So we thank you again. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the extra day off. Hopefully some folks will maybe be able to get out and just enjoy their families. So we thank you on behalf of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. This is the third and final summit for statewide strategy for Riverport investment. So you all have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll give you back the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Sister.
Bye-bye.